click that little button up there. We go back out of this, which is the select mode, and we go over to our document, hold our finger down and paste it. And there we have our question. You could use it to put together some really important questions for a tutoring session. It's clear that tablets are far superior for technology-based solutions in mathematics. When we write with a pen, we can write the complex mathematical notation, which is near impossible with a keyboard. Today, we're going to be looking at a way of making a worksheet, or maybe even a revision document for yourself, or writing your homework that we can then send off as a PDF as a finished document. Of course, you can write all of these notations with your handwriting, and yes, you get better and better. Well, you can't really beat the fact that it's much neater when it's written by a computer. So we're going to look at a really easy way of doing that without all the typing that you get from Maths Equation Editor in Microsoft Word. We're going to start with two programs open. The first is SNote, obviously, is what we write in. The second program is going to be Microsoft Solve. And this program has evolved over the years, but now what it does really well. We're going to use these in conjunction with each other. Before we get any further, I'm going to show how you might do this without switching into DEX mode, because clearly we're using two programs and we want to employ the best multitasking situation possible. You see these three lines at the bottom right. Then we press that button and we see what programs are open. And we hold our finger down on one of the programs. So you see, if we leave it where it is, it says drop here to open, which means if I let go of my finger now, it's going to take up the half of the screen, which is fogged up glass. I don't know how else to describe it. I could come across the middle here to a pop-up view, which I don't really want to use because they're a little bit too small. But if I've definitely got two programs, I want to be taking up the most. So it could go over here as well. Different area up here. As you can see, it splits the screen in half. I'm actually going to go for the right. And automatically, it asks you to open up a different program because, you're splitting the screen in half. And what we have up at the top is recent apps. These are apps that are open. You could choose to open a new one out of the most used apps, but you could see that you could go and choose so many. Let's pick the one that's already open because we prepared that one. Now, I find that it's not too much issue with this. You can zoom in and you can zoom out and edit most of it. It does sometimes seem a bit squashed. The options, see, it can move a different proportion, one to the left, and I probably would recommend a proportion something like this, because this way you can see more of where you're actually making the worksheet, which is going to be more important. Now, this is one way of doing it. We could obviously switch into DEX to have these two programs. So to start up DEX mode, we go to the quick link. As we have in no time at all, both of the apps which are now open at the bottom. And I've got my mouse employed, so I can use that to move around the screen and select a program that I want to open. I want to open the two that I had before. I can make it full screen, but I'm going to do exactly what I did in Windows actually, or what before. I drag it to the left of the screen and let go, and it'll invite me to take up a second position. So I've got two screens open now. And of course, you can mix and match the typing with diagrams. So let's say question 1 requires a diagram. We could go ahead and draw a diagram here and say that was 30 and then X here. I wanted to show another feature while we're here is that you don't need strict shapes anymore, like a square, like a triangle. You don't need those anymore to have a nice, what should I call it, a neat line. So if I wanted to do a curve like this, it would neaten it up. And that's really good for angles and a number of different things. You get all the usual word processing ability down the bottom. You can, if you want, add a tick list. This is super useful. I'll just use bullet points, as you've got some here or here. You can bold, italic, underline, underscore through, change the color of the font. You can even have a background to the font, the size, orientation, and give it an indentation so it comes away from the side. So it's fairly creative when it comes to word processing so that you won't need to do it in Word. Bearing in mind that Word requires a subscription to be fully usable on a mobile platform, which I think is totally worth it. So if you look at here, you would get Microsoft 365 for around £5 to £10 a month. And I found it to be excellent because not only do you get all those usable apps to their fullest, you also get the storage online of like a terabyte. But coming back to why I'm mentioning Word at this juncture, SNote isn't the only one that can use pen. If you do have Word, which I do, and I'll just open this up quickly, you can see that you have all of the typical word processing abilities that you have in SNote. And as long as you do have the subscription, you go along to this tab just here and here, and you can draw. So I could have my triangle in here. Let's see if it will recognize it as a shape. See, that's the downside there. You could still use the quick rub out button that's on the side of the pen, but it doesn't seem to add it as a shape. So there are some limitations on it. You get different colors, highlighters as usual, but so long as you don't mind it being ultra neat, then it's okay. But we're going to go back to SNote because that's got a lot more functionality compared to Word. So now we're back into SNote and we can see the power of drawing a proper triangle or graph, as it were. That's one of the benefits. What if you want to start typing x squared plus 10x? We don't want to see that. That's, you should be able to read that stuff for at times we don't have a good input. Let's say that then we decided to write the question. And that's okay. I mean, I could have much worse handwriting. I'm trying to do this badly now. I've got quite used to it, so I'm actually not that bad. And I could probably get away with it if I didn't feel very professional, right? But let's say I'm having a real hard time, and even this isn't good enough, perhaps because we want it to look really professional. This is where the other program comes into its own. Now I've got these two programs open side by side, and I can write in this program here. And if I move to the right, I don't need to click on it. It will automatically recognize that I want to be writing over there. The downside of Microsoft Solver is I can't press the button on the pen to quickly rub this out. I need to click physically on this rub out button and then get rid of what I was doing and go back to the pen. But it's quite seamless. So if I do something in one, I can copy it into the other. Right, so here's where my idea comes in. Let's say we want to design a question, and this is one that I put on Instagram recently. 3 to the power of 12x equals 9 to the power of x plus 1. And you'll notice what it's doing at the same time. It's making that question typed up pretty nicely at the top. So I've used my pen, which is my greatest asset. I'm quick with it, and then it's turning it into this really neat stuff. You can type it, you can edit it from here if you want. You think it wants to be more precise, or you want some fine tuning. But even if you'd fine tune it, so let's say you wanted to change this to 2, you could still do that. It will still recognize that. You don't necessarily need to go to a different area to fine tune it. So let's say we've got this. How do we get that into SNote now? That's our first question. Well, at the moment, it's a little bit small. So if we pinch zoom in this area here, we can then employ the special smart select. If we pasted this now, which I do hold my finger down, you'll see that it copied. Watch what happens if I put it into this, paste it. It's that funny sort of internet speak, which is fine, but it's not what we want. So we're going to take it exactly as it is. We're going to press the little button on the side of the SPen so that we get the menu, and we're going to smart select. And we're just going to grab that as quick as we can, as close as we can. And we can save it if we want to do multiple, but this is much easier at this point to just copy. So we click that little button up there. We go back out of this, which is the select mode, and we go over to our document, hold our finger down and paste it. And there we have our question. And you'll notice that we can make it smaller or bigger. I probably want it something like this. Okay. My preference is not to mix the two. My preference is actually to have a template in the background. Okay, so one more time how we get to that with the 3 dots, page template, and probably something like this, some squares. And we'll put that to a point. Now you've got to remember that this is A4, right? So you could be a bit smaller than you think. If you zoom in, you could fine tune that, and you don't need to worry about the fact that it's small when it's actually this size. You have to question how much you want on the page. If you're creating this worksheet and you want space to write, you can make sure you give space. You go to the bottom, and we just lift up the page, we let go, and it gives us a new page. So you can see roughly how big one page is there. And then we have it. We have one question. Now I don't necessarily like to type because these don't always align. If you're using different size lines or grids, so actually I prefer to write question 1. Now the good thing is, if you're happy with how you wrote question 1, you can select it and copy it, and you get some consistency. I find that the SPen is so precise, I need to use my finger to be still enough to hold it down and get the menu for paste, and then it's very quick from there. I can put that there for question 1. I rub out the question 1 and I put a 2. I could then keep pasting it ahead of time if I wanted, to give myself some sort of automation. Now let's go back to our right hand side. We just have to pinch zoom out of there so we see our pens again. We rub that out, and then we could go back in to draw our next question. So let's say we want to do a more advanced question. We want to do some integration. This is at A level, between 1 and 4 for the function x squared plus 2 with respect to x. Let's see if it can figure that. And it has done. Now I might want to put brackets around things. You could do what you want. I feel like that's clearer, so I'm going to leave it like that. And same job as before, we're going to zoom into this and we're going to copy. Try to get as close as you can to the outside. We go across to here and we paste it in. Now you don't need to keep to these lines, but they are good ways so that you know the size of it. You don't necessarily need to have lines either. We could go just a plain old question, and then it could be up to you how you do that. And you can make it bigger if you feel it needs to be. And just like what we did with the previous times with this solver program, we can go ahead and solve it, and we get the answer. So at the very same time, you could be writing the answers in a different color just quickly. I know some people like to have the numerical answer there, and that's something to give them a guidance without knowing how to get there fully. But as you can see, this program shows you the whole caboot. So obviously your students could have this, but at this point you could choose to copy this in, just like so. It depends how, you've got different styles, of course. And we can paste that just there. Maybe we could make it like super small. And all it is at this point is a reference, so that when we come to creating the answer sheet later, we can make that bigger and save 2 different files. So we can go back to the area where we're saving this file, copy and paste it, call one the answers and one the questions. I find that's really useful as you go along. So for question 3, this last type of useful mechanism in here, I would typically go to a different program, let's say Desmos or GeoGebra for drawing my graphs. But I can also go here, and this is where it could be quite powerful. Let's say I want to draw I want a graph so that perhaps they need to find the turning point coordinates, or I just want it as a reference. I can put this equation in here to solve, but it also plots it. I can explore this graph by clicking on it, and whatever scale I want, I can then zoom in and take this graph by smart selecting, copying, and then going back to my SNote. One of the really neat things about having the pen is you can annotate this now. So you could call this the equation that we had initially, or we could even go back, zoom in, and take this. Copy it across, and we've actually ended up with a really neat diagram. You can use different colors to highlight different sections, or you can annotate in any way that you want, but the worksheet suddenly becomes very fluid. There's also something about giving a hint in the worksheet that's in your handwriting. The last thing I suppose you could do is think about starting the question in your handwriting, which is far more powerful than a sort of detracted computer written version. You could say, okay, well, the first step here to finding this minimum point is to complete the square. So my first step, and we'll call it step 1, we could draw a line, hold it down, it becomes a straight line, even neater, is to have x plus 2 all squared. And that just starts you off. Or you could do the whole solution. It's really super powerful. I think it's a great tool. I should also mention that you can use your camera to take a picture of something that you drew physically on paper, not just on the tablet. And you guessed it, it recognizes this and turns it into proper maths type. Now we're in our Kindle app. We can use the ideas that we've just seen in a very similar way to collect questions in a PDF or SNote that will turn into a PDF to show our teacher, or just as a collection of really difficult questions that we'd like to understand one day. We can go to our Kindle or wherever you've got this saved, or you may even see it online, right, in a website, and we do smart select again. And we don't really like this question. It looks pretty nasty. All these worded questions in statistics can be tough. We can copy that. We can go across to SNote. And in here, we can call it a title, questions to tackle. And let's say you're studying multiple subjects, of course. And we can go ahead and paste that in there. So now we've got a collection of questions. You might want to write that this was statistics from S2 and its probability. You could line that off, give it a bit of space if you want. Nothing's set in stone. So you didn't like it there, so you move it down. You didn't like the size, it doesn't need to be that big. You can make it smaller. So you can make it really small to keep it concise. And when you want to read it, make it bigger. It's an interactive document in a sense. But you could gather all of this, have a go in any color you want. Say you want to have a go in a color that makes you feel like you're just having a test. And then you can write your answer. You can start it off in a different color. I think that's Poisson. So X is a Poisson distribution 25. Maybe it's a question mark because you're not sure. You can then save this and send it off to someone else, or just collaborate with someone, or have it there ready for when you've got a spare half hour to tackle it. I think it's clear that when we see a problem or have a good idea, we ought to write it down as soon as possible. So you can gather these questions in such a way, and you could even do your homework in it. Or you could add in a picture from a drawing that you were doing in perspective drawing. So we take a picture of whatever object, probably this is like Lego, and crop it. And then we can make it bigger. Then it becomes our drawing project, and rather nicely, you could draw over the top. And I am going a little bit fast because I don't exactly have all the time in the world, but look, I could even hold it down and it makes it nice and straight for me. I select this drawing, move it aside, and I have my own drawing. It's practical. It doesn't necessarily bring you skill, maybe like you'd want, but it gets you from A to B if you are trying to support your learning with a diagram. And I think there's a lot to be learned from tracing when it comes to drawing, because you get the angles, a feel for where they're going. But back to the worksheet. The last thing to do is to show how this can get shared very easily. So we currently have what we're happy with. We want to share it. We can go to our 3 dots and do a number of things. We can, first of all, save the file as a particular thing. So if I click on that now, I get the option to save it, and I can save it locally or to my OneDrive. Alternatively, I could share it straight away with this share button here. And then it gives me the option, again, to share it as a PDF or a number of these. I could share these via email, or I can share it straight to my OneDrive for safekeeping and distribution at another time. To have a quick run through of what these do, the Samsung Note files is as simply as it is now. You send it to somebody else who has Samsung SNote and they can open it and edit it just like you've been editing. The PDF file is a file which cannot be amended. It's a file which is a finished form and very small for sharing. If you send it as a Microsoft Word file, some of these will turn into drawings, into pictures, and others will turn into text. It really depends on how you've done the input. The PowerPoint file is very similar. It could save each of them as a picture. If we just click on that now. So as you can see, the elements come into PowerPoint. If you wanted to write in a PowerPoint, which can be very powerful in maths to demonstrate how to write the notation as a person rather than a computer, these elements come across in 2 different ways. So if I click on this, for example, you'll see that the elements which are handwritten are separated from the pictures that go in. It's the only thing to be aware of when this goes across. And you can move them all together, of course, but they're all their individual elements. And you can animate each of these elements and turn it into your PowerPoint. Continuing on, we can share it as an image file. So each of these pages just become a picture. You can have them multiple separate pictures, or you can have it as a collection, just one together, which essentially is just a PDF file. And finally, as a text file. But since we don't have any written text, we can't save it as a text file. If you're a perfectionist and what you've seen here today, you don't like those pictures where we have like a text, but then there's a block around them of white, which will contrast pretty badly with the background, with the grids. There's a really great program called Canva, and you can use this as a free version. I actually do a lot of the YouTube elements in here for thumbnail design. And you have this thing where we can easily remove the background. So let me import one of those pictures. So I've chosen to import a question that I did for a thumbnail at some point, which was in a paper that I released, a GCSE practice paper with unique questions. And as you can see, if I change the background here to red, then there's this really nasty background, which is white, which is looking a little bit clunky and not very chic. So I could do a lot of things with this program, but one of them is to background remove. And if I click on this background remove, I get this amazing background removal tool. This can be saved with a background which is totally blank. So if we make the background white like this, or I suppose it doesn't matter what color, we can export it and we can have a transparent background. We'll just add those grid lines in to show you the effect. We've saved it as a particular file. Now we're going to import that And there we have it. We can remove that background and have it in here however we want, and it doesn't mind about those grid lines. Anyway, there's a lot that can be done with just this tablet. And here's just a quick example of where you could use it to put together some really important questions for a tutoring session to start the session off, to review the last week or any problems they're having throughout the week. Do a nice concise area. After the work has been done, this PDF can easily be shared with the tutees' parents. So that was just a brief overview of how you can use your tablet as a teacher, tutor, or student. And if you've got any more questions about how it might be useful, then let me know, because there's a lot more that it does do.